Austin Hill, Sam Mayer, Sammy Smith, all drove like assholes.
The following is a production of Dirty Mo Media.
Hey guys, welcome to Action's Detrimental post Martinsville Speedway, where we turn back the clocks. Should that be the title? Yes.
I don't have a microphone today.
Oh, you don't have a mic? No mic for Trav today.
Damn, that sucks because someone at the track this weekend said, new segment idea. You just give Travis 5 minutes at the beginning of every episode to bitch about whatever he wants.
I feel bad now that I took his mic.
Well, hey, in case y'all don't know, we have a guest here. You may have heard this voice before, and I'm gonna butcher it so bad y'all have no idea. But Bozi Tatarevic. No, that's not.
That's okay. It's pretty close. We'll go with it.
Don't let him off the hook that easy. Try it again.
All right. Bozi Tatarevic.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We're making progress.
Little better?
Yeah, it's like 70% of what Jared does, so we'll let it pass.
Okay. Well, he's a writer for motorsport.com, road and track, and race car engineering, and also pit crew member of the Vassar-Sullivan Lexus team and IMSA. So welcome to the show. We have a lot of dialogue that we have with you outside of the show and whatnot, so it's exciting to have you on.
I appreciate you guys inviting me out. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, definitely feel like it's great to have your insight, and you've always been kind of well in tune with what goes on at the racetrack, being a part of it now yourself. And how long have you been in racing?
Actually, not that long. So maybe 8 or 9 years. I originally just started as a car enthusiast with street cars and just picked this up around 2016 or 17 and kind of just chased what I found interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome to have you, and you got some great insight. I've read a bunch of your articles and whatnot. It's been fantastic. So
you just went to the Vassar-Sullivan shop and was like, can I change a tire? And they said, sure.
Well, kind of, yeah. So during that, I picked up that gig during COVID. So they had trouble getting guys, and I heard about it. So I just sent an email. I was like, hey, I'll come, just give me a weekend to try out. I'll do it for peanuts, just, to prove myself. And I did a one-off race, and they're like, hey, you want to do one more? And then they're like, you want a year-long contract? And just built up from there.
That's awesome. Well, we had some races this weekend at the Martinsville Speedway. First, we had the truck race. We had Daniel Hamlin winning. That was if you would have said before the race that it was Daniel Hamlin would win, I'd say not really a surprise. Christian Eckes won that race last year, pretty much dominated. But this race certainly was dominated by, once again, Corey Heim just was lights out, fast. And I worked with him a little bit in the sim just for a few minutes during the week and, gave him an idea of like what I liked at a Martinsville track. And, he's kind of been stuck in that same, we've been pretty good, but not the best. And, whatever they had dialed up this week was fantastic, and Corey looked like he was heading to another victory, but unfortunately, some innocent contact, I'd say, there by Honeycutt, cut his left rear tire, and man, that's been the story of his season. But give Hemrick his flowers. He's a great guy. It's great to see him back in victory lane. I think it's only his second NASCAR win, right? So,
championship and this truck race.
Yeah. And so it was great to see him land on his feet as well. Daniel works really, really hard at this. And, even though he doesn't have the wins, he's been such a solid race car driver his entire career. So he's with a great team. Got his first win this season. My guess is it probably won't be his last.
I just realized you meant land on his feet in the truck series, not on the backflip on the track.
All the above. All the above. In the Xfinity race, we had Austin Hill as the winner. Do we even talk about the Xfinity race now or
just
later?
Get it out of the way?
What do you? He wants to talk about later. All right. So, Austin Hill. Let's talk about the winners and losers first. Austin Hill is on my list of winners and losers, but we'll get into that at a later time. Cup race, we won. We won. That makes it a lot easier. Hey guys, guess what? Lulu is finally not cursed. It's her first win.
Travis asked that this morning. He says, this Lulu's first win. And I was like, I don't think so. But yeah, you haven't won in year.
It's been a minute. Close to it. It felt like an eternity. But, we've had some close calls. Obviously, even this year, leading the last lap of Daytona 500, leading into turn 3 at Phoenix on the last lap. But, finally good to not have a close one. And this one was not necessarily close.
What did you said that you changed your approach to this race? The team changed the approach to this race. What was different about this versus, the last handful of next gen Martinsville races?
I just, I have to work a lot harder now to, continue to be on top of my game. It's so close that the margins are so small, especially in the next gen era. I used to say that, winning, 10, 12 years ago when I was racing Jimmy and Jeff was so much easier than what it is now. A lot of it is because our technique was just better than everyone else's. And I saw it when I was driving around everyone else. We would approach the racetrack a little differently. And, obviously the minute kind of SMT came out and all of our proprietary information and data started to, all the drivers got to see it. They got to see what these guys were doing. And then we've just morphed our style into where everyone's driving really, really similar now. And they're all driving really, really similar cars. And so it's the margins are small. You just look at the lap times, right? From 1st to 25th. I mean, we're all within a 10th or so. I mean, it's just not much. And so where are you going to find the edges? And so I went through a transition where Truex was, consistently beating me at Martinsville about 6-7 years ago. And so I said, all right, well, I really got to figure out why. And so I studied and I looked, and there was a moment where we had a rain delay early in the race, and he had just went around me. And at that time I was like, man, my car is pretty good. So why is he better? And so I logged on SMT. I looked at it and was like, okay, when we go back green, I'm going to drive my car like that. And let me just see what happens. And we went back green. I drove it like that. And immediately I said, whoa, I'm going to need something different out of my car to do this. Like it wasn't faster for me. I was driving the car to its max capability for the area I had sent my team down, because here's my driving style. I'm going to drive it like this. I need the car to work a certain way to adapt to my style. Martin had a different style. And so he needed something different out of his car. And so, Shannon Spake, I just spoke with her, and she actually brought this up. She's like, isn't this like going through a swing change in golf? And I was like, that's actually a perfect analogy, because it just takes time. Because what I realized in that moment is this way is faster, but not with the car that I've got. So I've got to change what I tell the team I need to adapt to this different style of driving. And so it's a constant evolution. And when they change tires and they change aero, what you want to do to make speed continues to change with it. And, yesterday was just one of those things where it all came together and it was perfect.
So is everyone chasing the same thing? Is every driver chasing the same thing now?
Mostly yes. But, again, it comes down to, and I think yesterday was probably a good example of it. Those that had the pit crews keep them up front for most of the day. That was a key. Certainly it was in our position. The 20 car made up positions on pit road. That kept getting his track position better and better. Because I thought, once he started falling, I was like, man, he wasn't good in practice yesterday. Where's he going to kind of land? But they got his car better overnight, and then his pit crew just kept continuing to keep him up front on pit road.
So can you elaborate on, because I listened to Bubba's interview after the race. Bubba finished third, and he said that he was, he's happy with the result, but he was disappointed or frustrated because when he got out of the car, he didn't know what he could tell the team. Like, what did he need to be better than you? Isn't it just a matter of, well, this is what Denny did, so like make my car like Denny's and drive like Denny, and then
yeah, I mean they'll be able to access where his deficits were compared to me and break that down. But at that point, then he has a decision to make. If I need to make more speed on corner exit, well, where am I have to sacrifice something else somewhere. You know, you're not just, well, I'm not just, you can't just put the throttle down and get more speed on exit. Like it's an approach thing. Maybe you need to slow up your center a little bit more, maybe things like that. So I think that all that kind of plays a factor, and it's the constant world that we're going in every racetrack that we go to trying to get better.
It's a big equation.
It's a big puzzle, and part of it is his experience too. So yesterday I was sitting in turn 3 watching, and you could see cars coming and going, and as tire temperatures built up, you could see cars start to get looser. And I saw Denny get loose quite a few times, but I could see him start to adapt. But there are also other cars that maybe they looked at his lines in practice or whatever else and tried to replicate that, and then they got to a point where they were really just killing their tires. And that's kind of that big puzzle of, like, you could see his lines, and the team could try to figure out what setup his car has and try to replicate it. But then it's all about that driving style and being able to adapt. And he was able to handle a car that was driving like that and keep it going in the long run, where somebody else will burn up their tires and just start falling backwards.
How does it work in IMSA? I mean, do y'all have some sort of data sharing or anything like that, or is it
nothing at all? It's basically, if you're watching somebody else, if you have your own resources to see it from a distance, that's it. But everybody's telemetry is private, and we get 30 or 40 or 50 channels versus 5 in in NASCAR.
Right? Yeah. So you have more onboard telemetry, so that the driver can kind of break down. Now, if he has teammates, well, then I'm guessing you guys can compare that.
Sure,
right?
sure. That's up to the teams to share.
Okay.
So for us, we have 2 Lexus RCF GT3s at Vassar Sullivan Racing, and the engineers obviously have IM and a bunch of data sharing, and then Lexus has some resources from us through TRD, so they all talk to each other. But that's a choice between the teams. So if if there were multiple people from our OEM, we might talk to them. Maybe not if they're from another team.
Right.
But that's your choice. There's nothing that's being forced to be shared.
Yeah, that's somewhat kind of how it is in the Cup Series, right? With Toyota, obviously 2311 and JGR has a very tight alliance, so we share pretty much everything. Where Legacy's a little bit more on an island. They want to be independent, so they don't have the ability to share in technical information, car setups, air pressures, all those things, right? They can see SMT, but again, and then they can try to draw up their own analytics based off of that channel, those channels that come out. But it certainly makes it more difficult to measure yourself when you don't have someone outside the organization that you can measure yourself with.
So when you're watching this race yesterday, Bozi, can you see with the naked eye when you're down there in turn 3 or wherever you're watching from, like, oh, I see what Denny's doing. He's going to be tough to beat. I see that Chase may be making up ground here at the end of stage 2, but he's not going to be able to pass him.
I mean, I can see to an extent. So I'm using, my mind as a mechanic of, like, all right, this is what the car is doing. This is how it's moving around. And you can see, how the front of the car moves, how the rear of the car moves. And a lot of it in the Cup Series, at least, is just about those tire temperatures. And once you cycle those tires, you kind of kill them. So that's what I'm watching. If you can turn without sliding your tires, whether that's front or rear, that means that you can keep your tires, to last longer and retain that track position. So I could see that. And then obviously I'll look at stats and I'll look at lap time data, and I'll map lap data over, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 laps and look at what people are doing. And then I can see trends and what's happening and kind of put all those pieces together to, in my mind, build up what I believe is going to happen. And that's why I'll often end up in the pit stall watching the pit crew of the eventual winner or the top 2 or 3, because I've seen the trend throughout the race and kind of have an expectation of what's going to happen.
Yeah, and to get even more technical with it, right, is that the basic fundamentals of race car, setting up a race car is you want to saturate the axles evenly, right? I mean, that's where you're going to get the most speed out of the car. Now, the difference is what drivers can handle you maximizing the axles the best. And I think Max Verstappen in F1, it's been wildly said many, many times about he's able to saturate the rear of his car more than others. So he's able to get more maximum grip out of his car because he can drive his car looser. So when his car goes into a slide, it's essentially a 4-wheel slide versus most people, I include myself in this, like my cars a little bit tighter. Now, on the bigger tracks. Shorter tracks, I like my cars looser. But generally speaking, you want to be able to go into the corner and work both front and rear tires evenly, and that will optimize the speed of your car. But very, very, very few drivers can handle that. It's really hard. You can do it when you're all by yourself, but in a racing condition, it makes it extremely hard to run your cars as free as what the computer would say is the fastest.
Did that play a big role yesterday into why in these new next-gen stats, I don't know if they're even called next-gen stats, but I just said that, next-gen stats, you were best on the long run and the short run? Does your tire conservation play into that?
I don't know. I've always said that I think that the driver in the car has a 50-50 shared responsibility in long runs. I think that certainly the team can build a car that is faster in the short run and worse on the long run. And the driver can do things that can make his car faster in the long run by pushing those tire temps early. But he's going to pay the price in the long run. And what I've said many times is what I like about this tire in general is that you have a choice to make. You can push it in the short run. And I think there was a time there late in the race where Christopher Bell was like, I need to get this lead like now. And at that point, I'm just like, I'm just going to keep you right there. And then, let him try to use his stuff up. And then I'll just, walk away later on. And so I made a distinct, once I knew that the race, we were not going to be coming back for tires. Once we got inside 60, 70 to go, it's like you're not pitting for tires anymore at that point. So I know how long I've got to go on this set of tires. I just made the distinct, choice at that point to, okay, this is how I'm going to approach it. Even if it gets by me, I don't want to do that, but I feel like this is the best way to optimize this race run.
So at any point while you were leading your 267 laps, were you concerned about someone passing you? And if they passed you, you were not going to get back to the lead?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there was some good challenges from the 9 and the 20 late. 23 was pretty close a few times as well. But I don't know. I felt as though once I got in control of the race, and you heard Chase Elliott talk about this post-race quite a bit, you certainly can dictate a pace a lot easier than when you have to chase someone, because you do have to use up your stuff more to try to get around people. And so it's much easier. And it's why you see the field according at that racetrack, where when I catch the back of the pack, everyone just comes right to me, because at that point I'm in dirty air. Now I've got to use up my stuff to try to get around them, and the field just comes to you. So Martinsville's been that kind of track for the last few years now, and it's definitely a chess match.
So do you want to get to the lap traffic quicker or later?
I want to wait as long as possible to get them that way, because, and you probably see it in lap times, there's a point where these tires do take a shit, but it takes a long, long time. And if I had one request, right, from the Goodyear tires, which I think have been so much better this year, and we hate to nitpick it, but the light switch needs to go off a little bit sooner, because the race runs just aren't quite long enough. Like, it's right when the lap times really start to deviate is right when we pit, and it's right when a caution comes out or the end of a stage. And it's like, man, you need that light switch to go off a little sooner, and then you'll see some big variation in lap times, which then creates tons of passing.
It's the issue that the Xfinity race had to an extent, because they had so many cautions. Yeah. So I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's a good example here, because they had so many cautions come up. The tires never really had an opportunity to work, because some of the runs were only 15, 18, 20 laps. So that's why you never saw guys spread out. You didn't see a bunch of cars go a lap down, because the tires never had an opportunity to wear. And that's where these skill sets come into play, is if you're on lap 75 on the same set of tires, you'll have one guy that's just sliding around losing it, while another person's 6 or 7 tenths faster, because they can handle it.
Go ahead.
Did the tires wear yesterday? I mean, it looked like it on my face on the side of the car.
I get it. The rubber is coming off of the tire, yes. The difficult job that Goodyear has, though, is that if they went there and they say it rained overnight and they tested tomorrow, they would run that same tire. I bet you that thing would cord in 40 laps if there's only a couple cars out there. But yet, Fox did a really good job of kind of showing the racetrack and the transition that it was going through and how black it was getting. Again, we've talked about it on the show a lot. It fills in the pores of that racetrack. And then the tire wear just dramatically goes down during the race versus what we have in practice and what we have in testing. So it would take a giant leap of faith for Goodyear to say, go to a tire test and say, all right, we're going to run this tire that wears out in 20 laps, and just trust that when it gets to the race, that thing is it's going to wear half as much. And so even in practice, I felt as though about lap 40 was like the light switch for me to where it was like, oh man, I really started dropping lap time and the tire started getting hot and wearing out. In the race, I ended the race and still felt like I had more to go, more in reserve. And so it's just the cup races and all those cars on the track really, make that tire wear go away, which is why we're pushing for more and more aggressive compounds to make this thing to where, do I love that cars were able to be 40 laps on tires and we all pitted and nobody was able to pass them? No, we want tires to really, really matter. But it's just, this is a step in the right direction. I'd just like to see another little step to increase it.
So what about the option tire?
I think this is the option tire.
I believe this was the softer option from last year.
Yeah. So it's what we ran in. It's what we ran. As far as I know, I could be misspeaking here. It's what we ran last fall, and it's also the option tire and that we ran at Phoenix, in the spring of this year, which will be most likely our championship tire for the final race.
So just at Martinsville here, it would need to be a little softer.
Yeah.
To get the optimal.
Yeah. And we
tire
saw
wear.
it again at Phoenix as well. In practice, it was like that option tire was good for 25 laps, and then it would start to cross. And it was like, oh, it's worse. But in the race, it was like 50 laps before it really took a shit. So it was like, man, it's such a hard job for Goodyear to get it perfectly right, and they're definitely going in the right direction, and it's helping. It's just cautions are saving some guys they're about to really fall in these situations.
That's the thing with these tires and the compounds is it's, again, just like the car, it's a big puzzle. So it's not only the compound and how the tire performs. Goodyear obviously has to look at the tire and say, hey, in this worst case scenario, we don't want the tire to cord. We don't want, tires falling apart on TV. But you also have like these secondary effects like you saw last fall, where the tire gummed up so much that it sent a chunk of rubber into the engine bay and jammed the linkage for the throttle.
That's right.
And that's like these secondary risks that Goodyear has to consider in addition to all the performance stuff, because the Cup cars don't have fender liners in the front, because they can't have fender liners in the front due to the aero balance of the car. Because if they did, it would cause the cars to be able to flip more easily. So that's like just one example of what Goodyear engineers are considering before they ever do this stuff, because it's wide open in the fenders. So you have stuff just flying into the engine bay. And just like your face was last night, all that stuff is sticking to parts in the engine that could, block a throttle linkage or cause a fire or anything else. So they have to consider all these pieces. So them being careful and going softer, in small grades is why they're doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, Taylor picked up a chunk of rubber at the end of last night. I think it was in turn 2, and she was throwing it at me. So yeah, I guess that is a hazard, right? Like it could get. Didn't you have a chunk of rubber in the car recently?
Well, I noticed going down straightaways that there would be large chunks, and it would knock my hood flaps would pop up, because I guess these chunks of rubber were hitting the bottom of my hood, and I thought I was blowing a tire multiple times going down the straightaway, because both hood flaps would just pop up, but it was just a big chunk that was going up through the hood of the car. Yeah, we saw it after the burnout. It caught fire. So, that is kind of the secondary risk to having tires that wear, but it's certainly better for the on-track product.
Do you want to see them keep going softer, or do you want to see races where they have option tires?
I personally, if I'm biased, I'm going to say I'd rather just see them softer. I think concentrating on left side wear would really be beneficial. As far as I understand, though, that Goodyear is nearly at its peak of being able to create a softer tire, right? I think they have something going on with their process, and there's a bigger picture to this where I think they have like some sort of union thing to where these tires have to be handmade, where the street tires are machine made. Like,
So that's kind of a general thing among racing tires, I would say, is that it's a very niche industry. So you have, street car tires that get produced on, with these robots and all these other things. But, race car tires, no matter if it's, an IMSA or IndyCar or NASCAR, it's a small portion of their business. So a lot of this stuff, the molds and things, have been made, to last multiple years because they have to make that stuff make sense financially. And we know what tires cost in all of these series. So, there's definitely an expense there. So for them, to go past a certain, extent of what they've studied, they may have to redesign all their equipment. So It's not just, taking a different rubber mixture. It's like, well, we might have to redesign this machine because it'll stick to this stuff that we have now. And we need this fancier material so it doesn't stick to that.
Yeah,
so
that's
so many
great
things.
insight for sure. Because I know that there's just so much more to it than what us, Monday quarterbacks can talk about to say, oh, just make a softer tire. I've been told it's not that easy. And again, I think it's what you're saying is that there might be some retooling that has to be done, things like that on the Goodyear side to actually do it. Hopefully we can get it. And this is, the type of thing I'd love to see us implement a little bit more on mile and a halves as well. Given our mile and a half, program is pretty good with the next gen car, but I think, everyone deserves credit in the industry to getting us to this point where when we started with the next gen car and they were putting on they were putting on compounds that they had with Gen 6, it was not even close. Tires weren't wearing at all because, as the loads of this car is not nearly of what it was in the Gen 6 car. So you need load to push down on the tire, to saturate it, to then wear it. And if you don't have the load, it's just going to skip across the racetrack. And so it's worse in traffic. It's worse everywhere. So, we're doing the best with what we have right now and certainly continuing to get better.
Hey, this is Dale Jr., and for the latest Actions Detrimental gear, go to shop.dirtymomedia.com. We've got plenty of options for you. We're adding new stuff all the time. That's shop.dirtymomedia.com.
Are you the best driver at Martinsville again?
I mean, how are you going to ask me that?
Just an open-ended question.
I mean, Travis over there pumping his fist. I don't know.
I mean, he thinks so. This guy on Twitter is just the biggest
You're
Denny
the best,
Hamlin
Trav.
homer.
You're the best. The guy rides and dies for this team, no doubt. I mean, days like yesterday when you have a car that is that good, it makes it feel like you're invincible and certainly gives you a lot of confidence. And I said it post-race in the media center that winning a race and dominating a race both gives you the same credit on the stat sheet. It shows the same, but it does not do the same thing to your confidence. And when you dominate a race, it's like we whipped their ass. Nobody was even close. And now it gives me dramatic confidence that I don't have to, every fall I spend weeks and weeks studying the spring Martinsville to figure out, man, why did I get beat again? Like what is it? And I keep picking apart little things, and I really worked with the team this week to say, here's what I think I need. Can we fix that? It might not be the right direction, but I think this is what it needs. And it feels gratifying to see it play out on the racetrack that way. So for me, I think this saves a ton of work for me when it comes to preparing for this race in the fall, knowing that puzzle that Bozi talks about, we figured out that puzzle, right? Now, things will change between now and then, but it's, you're going to have weather conditions, all those things. Maybe you don't qualify as well. How is I really going to be in 20th, right? Like all those things matter in the course of, of a weekend to determine your result, but it certainly is a great baseline to start with and that I can work off of to refine it for the fall.
Does Chris Gale's involvement now in your racing career, did that play a role into, figuring out this puzzle better than last year?
I certainly think that it's got some influence. I heard the engineers talk about post-race that, he did have some, quite a bit of influence on, this setup and kind of looking at some of the parameters in which we look and approach a short track. Maybe he's got a few things, that he looks at and says, well, this has been, when I've had success here, this has been the most important thing, or that has been the most important thing, where every team over time, when they find successes, they try to determine that is what made us best. And each crew chief will just say something different likely. So I think no doubt he probably had quite a bit of fingerprints on this. And again, I think it was a total team effort from everyone on the 11 car to get us a car that in my mind was as dominant as I've had there in quite some time.
Now that Chris Gabehart is overseeing all of, overseeing all of the race team at JGR.
Yes.
Is his knowledge of this race getting applied to the other JGR cars? Is that why Christopher Bell was as good as he was? The Toyotas overall were good in this race.
Yeah, that was encouraging to see. Because last fall we were the only good Toyota. Everyone else was not good at all. And and again, I've always thought that I should be able to run top 5 in reverse at that track. It's not that easy. Trust me, I just talked about how it's not that easy, but it's just my approach, I feel like it's just, that's my floor at this racetrack. But, to have it to where all your cars are up front and dominating, then it says that the general team approach is the right thing. Now, did the 11, the 20, and the 23 have the same setup? I don't even think close. I think we were all, which tells you there's something else that we really seem to have, hit that was better for all of us. And so I think that there's, a lot of things that play into it, but it's good to see all Toyotas running well because it tells you that our box is maybe bigger than what we thought it was.
Bozi, I talked to you a little bit. I think it was in stage 2. You were watching the pit stop. What did you see from Denny's pit crew throughout this day? Because you know how important it is that those guys keep this car up front with track position.
That's that big part of that other 50% that Denny mentioned is your pit crew has to keep you out front. So no matter how good you are, how good your car is, if your pit crew loses, a few tenths, you could go from 1st to 6th, and now your setup that's built to run in clean air sucks back here because you're just struggling and killing those tires. And the big thing here, I think, with all the JGR pit crews and 2311 pit crews is their jack moves this year. They've just made so much improvement on that. And that's, I think,
the jack moves?
Yeah. So the next big frontier is the Jackman and what he can do, because the changers are really tapped out by the equipment because the wheel guns are spec. And, you can only do tire on, tire off in so many seconds. But that transition across the car is where the time is made. So they're relying on the Jackman. And Denny's Jackman, Joel, yesterday I watched him. And when he comes across the car, he does a behind-the-back move where he picks up the jack as he drops the right side with his left hand, throws the jack behind his back as he's starting to run across the front of the car, grabs it with his right hand, and the way he grabs it, it turns the handle automatically. So the way the jacks work is you turn the handle to the left to drop the car, and you turn it to the right to build pressure to be able to jack it up. So he's dropping the car, he starts running, he's throwing the jack. While he's throwing the jack, he's retightening it. So when he gets over to the left side, he can immediately go to jacking without having to turn the handle at all. And he's doing this so tightly that I actually saw a picture the Toyota Gazoo Racing account on Instagram posted where Joel is coming around the car and you can see his hip is almost touching the headlight on the car. So this is how tight this stuff is going. But what you see there is, if you look at the other cars, you'll see the Jackman run across and you'll see the front changer step back to let the Jackman run in front and then go to the tire. Here, Joel actually beats the front changer across the car, so the front changer never has to stop. So Austin just goes in there straight on the tire, and by the time that tire's off, the car's already almost ready to come down. Like it's incredible to just watch all the little pieces come together, and that's, I think, that movement there and practicing that further will probably produce a pit stop in the 7-second range at some point this year.
So you're saying that this move is not is not a move that every jackman in the garage is doing.
No, so some of the Hendrick teams did something similar, but not quite as fast last fall. And I think the Gibbs guys and 2311 guys developed some stuff over the winter. And it's interesting because they're doing similar moves, but even the Gibbs and the 2311 jackmen have slightly different intricacies of how they run across the front of the car and what they do. And it's like the last race I went to was Atlanta, and now I'm here, so it's been 2 or 3 races, whatever long it's been. And just between those 2 races, I've seen them fine-tune these moves. So that's how significant this stuff is. And the thing is that they're not only doing it one time during the race, they're doing it every single stop. So Denny's pit crew, the 2311, number 23 pit crew has really been also a standout. Like, they're just averaging pit stops in the 8-second range for the whole race now, where, and that's separating a lot of the groups, where you have the front of the field now that's averaging 8s, where an 8, 2 or 3 years ago at Richmond, the 18 or 19 crew set the record at an 8.86. And now, the 23 crew 2 weeks ago did an 8.22. Like, it just keeps getting more and more aggressive. It's insane, like, how fast these guys are moving.
What do you think what is the absolute tap out? I mean, what do you feel like 2 years from now, where are we going to be? I mean, is it?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I'll say that I think the stops will get to maybe a 7.8 or 7.9, I think, is where the physics will allow it,
right,
how fast they're moving. But I'm also interested to see if NASCAR wants to get their hands on the jacks eventually, because I feel like that might be coming if these gaps start to grow, because the wheel guns are spec. The jacks are kind of the big thing that teams can build on their own or buy off the shelf. So JGR, builds their own. Hendrick builds their own. 2311 buys an off-the-shelf unit. And obviously, it's not a huge difference, but the way the jacks move, the way the cars go up, like, the interesting thing right now is that Hendrick probably, their jacks lift the car more quickly than the JGR jacks, but because the JGR jackmen are doing this move, they're making up the difference. So if the JGR jacks develop to go up as fast as the Hendrick jacks, that's where those 7s, I think, will come. So the question is, if NASCAR allows the jacks to be an open item that the teams can build, I think 7.8, 7.9 is the limit. If they say, hey, we have a spec jack, then we might be getting close to tapping out the time we can get from them.
I mean,
I know nothing about a jack, by the way. I never touched one.
I mean, we're both, I knew about 85% of what he was saying, but still he's got enough information and knows enough to, like, what you see on pit road is you just see a pit stop, right? A car go in, car go out. And while you're explaining this, Travis is shaking his head. It's just like, this is the difference, right? These are the tenths of a second that make a difference whether we go out first or second. And whether I go out first or second is the difference in whether I get to set the pace or I've got to chase. And it's a major, major difference in your finishing result week in, week out. And what feels good to me right now is that I feel like I'm doing my job for my pit crew, and all the things that I need to do, and they're knocking it out of the park, and we're gaining positions each time, and that's a very confident feeling. And we know I've had times where, it's not felt that way, and I've had a lot of rough goes at it on pit road, but this group is meshed together. Like you mentioned, the Jackman has such a big role in it. I agree that we're nearly tapped out on changer time because of the equipment. And really that transition and that Jackman, I get to see it every pit stop. I can see the Jackman and his motions and all that stuff, and it's just like, holy crap, that is athletic. I mean, it's just, these guys are specimen, and they continue to refine their footwork, where their body position is, how they hang tires. And would you say that, kind of, and I heard this brought up, I forget who it was. Maybe it was Steve Letarte and Jeff Burton post-race. But they said, it's probably why we're seeing loose wheels as well. Because if you see, a lot of times we'll drop jacks and they're not even checking to see if they're just going off of sound or rhythm of, well, the lugs should be tight at this point, and they drop it because we're all fighting for that time. Where when we had 6 men, the jackman just could concentrate on, looking down, looking to see the changers are done, and dropping it. Now he's hanging tires. His head's turned sometimes when they're dropping the jack. Like, it's, do you think that that's contributing to some of the loose wheels that we're having?
Absolutely. If you're a jackman and you're looking back to the other wheel, you've already lost on that pit cycle. So human reaction time for like an average person is maybe 0.2 of a second. Elite athletes are maybe like 0.15. So even if we consider that 0.15, if you look at one tire, then look at the other tire, that's 0.3 of a second
Right.
you've already lost before the car can go down. And the pit stops, like you and Bubba, I think it was the second stop, literally the exact same timing. So it was 8.8, I think, for both of them, if I remember correctly. So if you add 0.3 there, not only is he getting out in front of you, but 4 or 5 other cars will probably get out in front of you. And that's the thing. And that's a good point about not having an extra carrier is the jackman really can't check any of the tires. If you're going
Right.
to do a quick stop, he just has to rely on the sound. But when you're on a yellow flag cycle, there's, dozens of wheel guns going off around you. So even that sound can kind of be defeating. So the jackman, if you watch any given pit stop, like on the right side, he'll jack the car up, grab the tire, hang it. And as the tire is being hung, he's not holding it to the car. He's literally turning around to start that move we discussed. So the car is dropping basically within half a second of, him hanging the tire. Where like in IMSA, because we have longer pit stops, like when I carry and hang a tire, I'll hang a tire and make sure it's pushed in as my changer's going on because we have plenty of time just based on the rules there. In NASCAR, that's not a possibility. And that speed, when people ask me why, why don't you have loose wheels in IMSA, which does happen occasionally, and there's so many loose wheels in NASCAR, and I tell them it's literally just the speed. Like we can take our time. Like I can hang a tire, and if it doesn't hit the pins just right, I can push it back.
Is it because fueling is slower?
Yeah. So on our side, we have minimum refuel times. So in the GTD Pro class,
okay.
where our Lexus races, a full fill is 40 seconds. So for us, we practice pit stops for basically the partial fills, the end of race restarts and stuff like that is where we practice the tire changes, where we shine. But like during a standard full fill pit stop, like, on a standard full stint, like we'll change the tires, do a tear off. Like I've done like full adjustments to the car before the fueler is done. So that's just the nature of, that's the nature of trying to equalize everything, which I don't necessarily agree with.
Right.
Just because we're faster on tires than a bunch
Right.
of our competitors. I would like us to be able to see,
That's right.
just go on tires. But when it gets to the end of the race or like these street races that are short, that's where we get to shine. And that's
I gotcha.
how we've won in the past of like, we only need 8 seconds worth of fuel. Let's send this tire change. But in NASCAR, that scenario happens basically every single pit stop. So you don't have time to think. If you think, you've already lost on pit road. And I think it's also risk analysis. So the left side wheels being lost is typically a case of, carrier or, jackman hangs the tire and the changer goes in and maybe it's not right on the pins, which the drive pins are these pieces on the back that basically, line up the wheel with the hub and the brake. And it's not perfectly on there and he has to, hit the gun twice. Well, the jackman doesn't have time to look or listen to that. So he's ripping the jack. You're taking off because you're going on the jack drop.
That's right.
And that's, so that's why these things happen. But there are also opportunities to take a moment. So yesterday, SVG had a loose wheel, and that's what I would consider outside of a typical scenario. So his loose wheel was on the right rear. And anytime there's a right side wheel that's loose, I look at it as a process error versus just pure speed. So if you're on the right side and you're going in with the wheel, if you're a changer and it doesn't feel just right, I would stop.
Right.
Especially if you're on a green flag pit
Right.
cycle, because you're not going to lose that many stops.
Because
if
of
you
the
take a
field
second.
spread.
Correct. Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not,
yeah.
you're not going to risk losing 10 spots. You're just going to
Yes.
lose, a second or two.
Yeah, so you might lose 1 or 2 spots,
Right.
and the risk reward there is like on a green flag stop, just take it easy, and that's kind of going back to our pit stops, the same approach we take. If we know that we're on a full fill, we can rip a 13-second stop if we need to, but we can do a 16-second stop on a full fill if the field's spread out. Like there's no need for us to rush and make mistakes if there's time. And so the right sides, I don't excuse that as much on the speed because you can see if it's not going on as well, then you just need to stop, fix
Right.
the wheel, redo it. You lose a second, lose 2 spots is fine versus going on vacation for
Right.
2 weeks and, being held for 2 laps. There's just too much risk with it. But my explanation every time is it's just pure speed. Like the human brain can't react as quickly as these guys are moving now.
Yeah.
So you're saying the jackman can slow down if he sees that.
Well, it's up to the changer,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
up to the
like
changer. So if you're
to
on-
give a pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're on the outside, like we saw yesterday with SVG on the right rear, and you go on with the wheel gun and something doesn't feel right, if you don't run to the other side, the jackman's not going to see you have a tire off. So the jackman doesn't have a tire to hang, so he's not going to set the car down. So, the jackman controls the launch of the car, but the jackman won't drop the car until that inside rear is changed. And until the rear changer returns, that's not going to happen. So I understand what could have happened is likely the wheel nut didn't go on fully straight. So it's, it'll go on and the wheel gun will feel like it's torqued. So the very best changers go by feel. No matter if you have the wheel guns here or if you have the censored wheel guns in Formula One or whatever else it is, it's all about feel, because the sensor, even if you have a sensor like they do in Formula One, it won't light up enough as what your hands will feel. And that's the same thing for me. If I go around the car, carry a tire and hang it on the car, I can tell you within half a second whether it hit the pins or not, because it's just, you just learn that muscle memory and that feel.
So are the pit crew guys aware of this? So like when Denny comes in, he pits from first and he's got 4 lap cars between him and second, and the guy in second can't get to your bumper before entering pit road, right? Are the pit crew guys aware that we might have a half a second more to work with here, 1 second more to work with here, that it's more beneficial to make sure we get this right than...
It depends. So if you're coming in under yellow, then you're just all out. But if you're coming in under green, the experience will tell you that, hey, we're going to have a little bit of room to work with here. And that's the thing, is getting that extra information, at least from my perspective, doesn't ever really help me. Like, I'm going to go and do my pit stop the way I think is the best I can do it. If, giving me extra information or some kind of outside pressure is really not going to motivate me to go faster or do something different. And I think that's the key to kind of being an elite pit crew guy, is that you have to be able to just let everything get blurred out. So there's stuff happening around you all the time, and you just have to stay laser focused on your task. And you just got to do that and react if you need to react. But all the outside stuff, like when I go over the wall, like one of the things that we actually discussed recently was, I have a Whoop band, so we monitor like heart rate and stuff like that. Like, my heart rate actually is higher being told that we're 10 away from pitting than when I actually go over the wall. Because once I get on the wall, it just completely calms down and goes basically like my resting heart rate.
Yeah.
And then after the stop, it obviously goes up just from running around with tires. But that's the thing, like an elite pit crew member is just, there's nothing else that exists. It's just you and the car in an empty room is kind of where your mindset is.
Before we move on with the pickers, I got one more question, because the way you're talking about this really emphasizes how athletic these crew guys are. And was it a few weeks ago, NASCAR teams were at the NFL Combine scouting players. Are athletes in other sports, NFL prospects, aware of how much athleticism is needed to pit a cup car? Or any car in that matter?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's getting bigger and bigger now. Last year I was at Phoenix, and there were, like agents and people walking around, and one of the NASCAR people is like, hey, he can tell you about pit stops. And this guy's like, yeah, I'm, an interface between athletes that are looking for something, as they move on from, the NFL or NBA or whatever into a second career, whether that's coaching or doing something else. And we heard there's stuff happening here. So I think the exposure to it is growing bigger. But I also think that the pit crew component and the publicity of it, I think, deserves a lot more than it gets right now. And that's kind of been, my personal project. But unfortunately, it just takes time for that stuff to build up and for teams, PR and marketing departments to trust letting these guys out in the wild. But I think that highlighting pit crew members even more will bring these types of people in and help recruitment efforts even more.
Yeah, I think for the average fan, it's just so hard to see and pick apart this stuff when they're watching from the stands or even on TV.
It's crazy what makes the difference, and it's just small little things for each person, and their importance and their role of that car's result is down to their job. And so it's great for you to highlight that. Certainly, these guys are they deserve their flowers, and it's great that that you kind of educate the fans on what these little intricate things are that makes the difference. And so that's really cool. And, we did have some other stuff that happened during the race. We had a few incidences. Which one? We got lap 71 with Chris Buescher. I think that was, he came up on somebody, right?
Gregson, right?
Yeah, on Noah. Not clear for sure. No, that was Carson. It was Carson and Buescher first. And then Buescher, later on the race, there was kind of a checkup. Noah got really pissed, I saw, during that caution flag. But, there was a big stack up. Buescher just didn't, he was like a half a second late to reacting to it and kind of ramped up on the side of Noah's car and destroyed it. So Buescher definitely had a tough race from where they qualified. Didn't really perform that great during the race. But a couple others, lap 298, we had a caution for Gibbs. That was Tyler Reddick. I watched that one, and it looked like Tyler, kind of jammed into a hole that was definitely going to close. Like when I saw, it looked like he was playing defense to Austin Dillon more than trying to make a move on Ty Gibbs at the time. I looked at it, and the 45 came off the corner, and he was trying to clear. He was really driving into turn one really fast to try to get back to the bottom. And at that point, he got to the bottom. Gibbs has got probably 2 car lengths to him, so he's thinking, I can just arc out this, diamond this corner like I usually am. Well, then as he's coming down the racetrack on turn 2, 45 sticks it in there, spins out Gibbs. So definitely Tyler's fault on that one. I saw he went and talked to him after the race. It's good to kind of get that cleared up and whatnot. And so what other ones did we have? We had, Cindric and Herbst. As a car owner, I'm not liking, Austin Cindric spinning out Riley Herbst, and it's starting to get on my nerves a little bit that Austin Cindric seems to be losing his mind a little bit more than usual. And I can only say that because I did give him a lot of credit early in this year on his, super speedway driving and being smart inside the race car. But he's starting to be a repeat offender, in my opinion. When things aren't going his way, he's wrecking guys. And so I don't know how NASCAR will look at this. It's different because it's not a right rear hook. It was essentially kind of a left rear, I don't know, with a hook, but just kind of shove into the corner. NASCAR probably will view it as a racing incident. But anyone with any driving experience would say that he got pissed, he got squeezed, and he wrecked the 35. So, and I was trying to figure out, like, well, who closed the gap? And the 35 came off the wall a little bit more than he probably should have, but the 16, there was no room for 3 cars. Like, between the 3 of them, the 2 out, the inside and the outside guy, they didn't leave enough room for Cindric. So Cindric, I think, was going to hold his line, but that they just squeezed him, and he felt like it was more evidently on Riley's fault than Dinger's. But this is just Cindric's getting a couple close ones here where NASCAR needs to start taking habitual behavior into account. It happened with Austin Dillon at Gateway a year or so ago. I think he right-reared him. We had the Ty Dillon thing this year and now this. And so it's not looking good, and Cindric needs to clean that up.
And this is also just a product of where you're racing, right? Like, you're deep in the field. These situations occur.
When I went back and watched the race, it was crazy to see. I was up front all race, so my car was obviously a lot cleaner, but the cars were beat to back there. I mean, they were just, it's just crazy how much they're running into each other. And I get it. Everyone's grinding because, the leaders are going to be on you in 40, 50 laps. And so everyone's trying to get all they can, but yikes, it's rough back there.
That's one of the things I noticed standing in turn 3 is, like, you guys up front, your cars were decently clean, but then once you started getting deeper into the field, as they passed by, I could see a lot of them a gap between their hood and the louvers, which means that they've been smashing into people. And they're like, from like 15th on back, there were a bunch of cars where you could see that gap where they had smashed into somebody at some point.
Yeah, it seems like if there's a gap between the hood and whatever else you talked about, it means you ran into a guy pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that pretty much covers the stuff on the Cup side.
Well, we got to talk about
what?
We talk about the winner.
Okay, what do you want to say?
I don't know.
We
It just
won 55. It's awesome. Rusty Wallace got his 55th at that track. It was his last win. I don't plan on this being my last. But
all right, well, we can start there. It seemed like you did silence some doubters. New sponsor, new crew chief. Denny's in his 40s.
yeah,
He's gonna win again.
I'm pretty selfish in the sense of like, you know, when they say, what does it mean to you? And I always think about, well, what does it mean to me in my accomplishments? And certainly winning 10 years ago at that track, you know, it being that big of a gap, it's not like we've been crap for the last 10 years. We've just always been right there on the cusp and just didn't do it. But it's super gratifying for that standpoint. But this is probably one of the very few wins that like I was more happy for my crew chief, Chris Gale. And I think that, you know, he's had, we talked about it, a tough go having to have these young guys and, you know, try to help mentor them, also crew chief them, and also help the engineers. Like, that's a tough job when you have a young driver and you're trying to figure out, you know, what's the best way to build the car to optimize speed, but yet make it to where they can drive it. Like, it's hard to do. And so I think that I've tried really this year to make his job as easy as possible by just straight giving him whatever information he needs to make the car the best it can. And, you know, certainly I wanted to do it more to silence his doubters more than necessarily mine.
Yeah, I think that's what the talk on social media has been, right? Like, there's been doubt in if Chris Gale can win with you. And I don't know. You've run well this year. Obviously, could have won Phoenix, nearly won another Daytona 500. It's like you've been there, but it's also just been like, I don't know, is it gonna happen?
Yeah, and I can't say that I wasn't worried too. I mean, I was in a comfortable situation with Chris Gabehart, and I thought he was the end for me when it comes to crew chiefs. But JGR had, you know, different ideas, and obviously in the moment I was pretty shook about it, and I was like, you know, well, I don't want to start all over. Like, you know, I'm too old. I don't want to start all over. And so I sucked it up and said, well, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm not going to waste the last years of my career, you know, pissing and moaning about this. I'm just going to be a professional and do everything I can to make sure this works out. And if me, I said it before the year started, like, okay, well, was it me or Chris? You know, what is, you know, what was it, right? And I think it was truthfully a combination of both. I think he made me better in a lot of aspects, and I took a lot of that into my mentality with Chris Gale now. But I think we both had a big role in our success over the years, and now I'm excited to build that new relationship and new achievements with someone else.
It seems like Gabehart also took a lot of gratification in seeing you win with Chris Gale yesterday.
Yeah, he did, and certainly, you know, I appreciated the nice comments that he said about it, and he wanted to win a grandfather clock with me really bad, and we worked really, really hard to make that happen. It just never did for various reasons, but absolutely, it was gratifying. I know for him to see the team that he helped build, you know, and the mindset and the things that we work on, see it to come to fruition.
So you have 6 of these things now, and as you said before on this show, that you don't even know where half of them are. So, I mean,
I know where most of them are. There's a couple that are unaccounted for, but yeah.
Before we move on, let's talk about the origin story of the 11 against the world flag.
Yeah, so I don't think the Fox guys knew kind of where. I thought they right. It was they were like, what in the hell? But it was a fan gave me this. They gave it to me before the race, and obviously it came from. I mentioned it. A few of my friends that are huge Ohio State fans. You know, that was kind of Ohio State's mantra was, you know, Ohio against the world. And so we carried around this flag to all of the college football games that we went to. And it's what got us on ESPN. Like, I was so excited that, like, you know, we're got this flag, and, you know, it was kind of our thing. Like, when we didn't have the flag, I told Charlie, I felt naked without this flag. And when Jack Sawyer took this flag in the national championship game, I'm like, damn it, we got to have another one. We didn't get another one, but we did have a fan, and the guy says, hey, by the way, Travis, he says, it pains me to give you this because I'm a Penn State fan. He says, but I am. And so it was awesome to see him give me that. And I just knew that if we won the race, I kind of wanted to shake it. So it wasn't anything other than a nice gesture that a fan gave me to say, good job, and kind of play into the Denny Hamlin against the fans type of mantra that we've got going on.
But it feels like that's also kind of dead now.
I feel like the fans cheered more.
They did.
It was definitely a balance towards the other
Balance,
end. Because,
yeah.
I know most races, like your driver intro, I don't even have to be looking in that direction. Like, I'm talking to crew guys before the race, and I can hear just based on the boos. But yesterday after the race, it was like light boos. I would say it was 40% boos,
Yeah.
60% cheer, which is like a huge balance based on what I've seen in the past.
But that's what makes me so excited is those because it was a lot of boos in pre-race, right, during the intros. But, like, what do you got to boo now? Like, I just beat your favorite driver again. and it killed me not to say it. And but I don't know. It just, that's what I love, is being able to silence those people and just give them the old shh.
What did your dad?
It's night time.
What did your dad think of it?
He was good. He was good. He didn't say anything to me. He called when we were Victory Lane. He just said, make sure you bring me the flag and sign it and put 55th win on there. So I made sure I did that.
The actual flag. Not
Yeah.
Oh, the win flag, not the against the world
Yeah,
flag.
no, he didn't care about that one for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly I feel like the sentiment towards you is changing a bit, just because after the race when you're signing autographs for everyone waiting outside turn 4, someone walked away and they're like, he changed me. I got to admit it. I'm a fan now.
Jared, we got to be real though. If I would have finished second or third or bumped, Larson or Chase Elliott, I would have had the golf cart ride to the motorhome lot saying, "You fucking suck."
I think this show has changed the perspective a lot, because I look at social media and just to get a gauge for everybody. And I think that I see very often, I was like, I really hated you on track, but now I listen to you talk about, whatever on Actions Detrimental. So now I like you as a host. And then eventually some of them you'll see like, I kind of like you as a driver now too. And I mean, that's I think a huge thing, being open like this, that brings people in.
Yeah, and it's fair, right? I mean, everyone, when you have a fandom towards a certain driver, you don't have a responsibility to like anyone else, right? And if that driver beats your guy or maybe knocks him out of the way, like I've done a few times, a few people, I understand where all that comes from. And so I'm willing to take it and understand that, there's a role in that in our sport. And certainly I feel like it's played into what feeds my inner passion and competition in my soul. So I appreciate the fans and their reaction, good or bad, to it. So
I think the personality is appreciated.
Yeah. Well, the last thing is the Xfinity race. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I just I think I pretty much said in some tweets what I thought about it, and that it was horrible. And I can only speak to what I am as a car. I can speak to what I am as a fan. I can speak to what I am as a car owner. And I can tell you, I'm not impressed. Austin Hill, Sam Mayer, Sammy Smith, all drove like assholes. And it's my job to be subjective as I can be on this show. And I said, at the time, good thing I'm not in the booth. I'd be fired for calling these guys out. And let me be clear on that. I think Parker Kligerman did a good job to be as fair as he could, but yet as truthful as he could. Even after Sammy Smith did his interview, he was like, I don't agree with that. And so that's really well done by Parker to hold these guys accountable, because I believe in my heart of hearts, there's only a few things that you can do to really change this. And it's sad to say, I think public shaming is maybe some of it. Like, not saying, hey, that's not impressive to me. I own some cars in the Cup Series. And if you ever think I'm going to look at you as, that just because you wiped the guy out and won, no, that doesn't impress me at all. So it just shows me immaturity. There's been multiple opportunities for these guys to, get to the finish in a somewhat respectful way. We're not expecting these guys not to make contact. We're not expecting them to, not try to get the guy out of the groove. But coming from 2 or 3 car lengths back to wreck someone is just the most unimpressive thing I've seen. And beyond that, and the reason I've got to call these 3 guys out, and there was many other, and I just don't have time to break it all down. But Austin Hill managed to wreck someone that was 4 car lengths in front of him. Like, I'm sorry, but giving the excuse that, well, I just got in too deep and I wheel hopped, there's no way you misjudge the corner that far to wreck a car that far in front of you. You got into back of someone, and then you kept shoving. That's the problem I had with what Austin Hill did through the race. Now, he won the race. Congratulations to him. Again, not impressed. He didn't do anything wrong at the end of the race. Let's be clear on that. He won it fair and square. He didn't knock anyone out of the way really to do it. He deserves to win the race on that. But there were moves in the race that were just so unimpressive to me. And one of them, it took his teammate out, was Jesse Love. He was an innocent bystander to Austin Hill shoving in the back of somebody and just not letting off. Same thing for Sam Mayer. He got on the back of Christian Eckes and just wouldn't get off of him. Like, if you're on someone's bumper, it's not, and if you choose to not let off, you are fine. You're saying, I'm good with you wrecking, so I don't lose one position here. And that is just total lack of respect. And I'm tired of hearing these guys say that, oh, well, they would have done it to me. Like, it doesn't fly anymore. Taylor Gray at the end of the race, I just don't see anything he did wrong. That the 8 shoved him out of the groove, and he shoved the 8 out of the groove. Again, he didn't drive in, knock him. Like, he did the same thing he got done to him, and I think both of the moves were fair. What Sammy Smith did originally to Taylor Gray, I deem that okay. Do I love it that he shoved him? Like, he just got him and shoved him. It's essentially kind of what I was trying to do with Chase Elliott back in 2017. Only back then, I did it way too hard. Yeah, I spun him out there, right? I was trying to just shove him up the racetrack so I can get under him and misjudged it. And so that's on me, but I have to try to do my job here and call these guys out for just driving like idiots. And these 3 just topped the list for me on Saturday. And so I hated to see it. Taylor Gray really deserved to win the race. He didn't. I think he's, considering the last couple years at that racetrack, he's probably handled it as good as he possibly could. But I also, I hear some people talking about, what do you do about it? And it's like, if you can't let us police it on the racetrack, because, when I tried to do it with Ross a few years ago, I got, penalized because of what I said on the show, saying, yeah, of course I took him up to the fence. Look what he's done to me over the last few years. If you're going to say it's self-policing, you got to let them self-police it. Or, in this instance, I truly believe NASCAR needs to step in, and not on the ticky-tack stuff. I'm saying use your eyes and your brains, and anybody could call what we saw. There were 3 incidents in particular. The 21 when he ended up wrecking the guys way up in front of him. The one where Sam Mayer just flat out would not get off the back of the Eckes one. And then at the end of the race. Those are 3 easy penalties that are not even debatable, right? We're not going to get into ticky-tack stuff, but my opinion, Bozi, is that if you penalize once, it at least gives these guys a little bit of a pause to say, if I send that guy to the back, if I'm Sam Mayer and I see that Christian Eckes is about to spin, I know I'm about to have to go back there with him. And more than likely, you face the repercussions then. So
we saw it in the truck races last year. There was a couple of truck races where I think they held trucks for doing egregious stuff. So I think that's a good example of it.
And nobody wants them to have to get into these balls and strikes calls, but these are not balls and strikes. These are pitches to the head. And that's when you get ejected, right? These are not balls and strikes. This is egregious going after the batter type of scenarios.
It's flagrant stuff. And
yes.
that's the thing is the Xfinity Series is one of my favorite racing series to watch just because the cars are so cool, the racing is so good. Like I have kind of, a bucket list of stuff, and that's like an Xfinity car is still something I have on my list that I want to work on if I have an opportunity, because it looks so cool and so fun. So for me, like Saturday, I'll typically stay after a race, talk to engineers, mechanics, just to figure out like what they did, why stuff's interesting. But I just left because I was like, all the good cars, all the stuff, all the people that executed, they got wrecked in the last lap.
Yeah.
And that's what's so disappointing. And for me, like I look at it sometimes not just from that perspective, but just dollars and cents. Like an Xfinity body costs $10,000. And they treat it like a shopping bag, basically. And then, people are talking about costs and expenses, and we need to reduce crew members and all these other things. I was like, no, it's like, teach these guys some lessons. If they're not wrecking $10,000 bodies every weekend, you'll have a lot more money to pay mechanics and engineers, and won't have to do all these roster games and all this other stuff. Like it's just extremely disappointing to see such a cool platform misused in such a way, and to see people knocked out for no reason.
I mean, you guys race in IMSA. What if someone cleans someone out in the final lap? Like cleans them out? Is there?
I mean, there's penalties for everything. So IMSA is kind of, which is interesting because IMSA is kind of loosened up their stance. Just, obviously IMSA is part of NASCAR, and I think some of that's flowing our way. So previously, a lot of stuff got called. Now, less and less stuff is getting called. And that's our sister car, the number 12 Lexus, the last race at Sebring. Jack Hawksworth, he was leading. It was like 2 laps to go. And one of the Mercedes just came and just punted him in the rear. And we're like, this has had to, because he punted him so far that he went off across a curb and then had to come back. And no, they were like, no, this is just racing incident. So they're trying to loosen stuff up. But most cases, if you do have an avoidable contact penalty, you'll either get a warning if it's a first one, or if it's repeatable, you'll get a drive-through or something to that regard, which will usually kill your race. So I think stuff like that, to an extent, if you could see it with your naked eye that something's very, egregious, hold them for a lap or make them do a drive-through or something to that effect, so they learn their lesson, because they're obviously not going to learn anything from financial penalties or any of this other stuff, because they'll just, they'll keep throwing money at it, and it doesn't teach them anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand what's so hard about making the call, because even in the Cars Tour race, they have it, right? You spin someone out, and it looks like you could have not done that, they'll put you to the back. And that is the one thing that will keep you from just cleaning someone out, because you're like, there's no reward to doing it, right? Where I think what happens is the higher you get up in the NASCAR series, the looser the rules become. And so it's very interesting that it works that way. But even in our local short tracks, they implement the black flag for reasons, and we have that flag for a reason. So it's my opinion, we need to use it in egregious situations. And there's not many tracks where you're going to have to officiate this, right? I'm not going to say it's a Martinsville only thing, but it's really the short tracks.
Bristol maybe and stuff like that. Yeah.
There's just some tracks where it's there, but I think that it just takes 1 or 2 calls, and it's going to just calm all this down quite a bit. We saw it in the Clash, like I've said for many years, when the LA Clash was getting out of hand. I was like, just call one person for rough driving, and it will calm the field down. And so I had some dialogue with Elton. Hopefully he agreed that, Saturday was definitely too far, and hopefully they do something about it in the future, because we want to see, guys, be taught the right way to race. So
I'll use Sam as an example, but over the summer, he had said that he was pissed off that he wasn't in the running for more cup rides.
Which is understandable from a results perspective.
But you're saying that
because
no matter how many times you win, if you drive like this, it resets.
It does not impress us. I can only speak for 23-11, but it doesn't impress me for absolute certain. And so it just shows me the level of immaturity and says that kid's got a long way to go. Now, which sucks, because I've also given Sam his flowers on races that he's won, and it was like, I think Sam Mayer has gone through one of the biggest transitions of racecraft. Now, this was a bad example of it, but over the last 3 years, I think he went from someone I was like, he'll never make it, like he's just not good enough, to, wow, maybe he is. And maybe he's hitting this, he's starting to win road courses, he's competing on the intermediates. Like, he really has taken a step in the last few years that has been impressive. But it's moments like this where it's like, let's reset this. Now he's got to start all over again. So it's unfortunate, but they got a lot of talent. It is, what we saw this weekend was just immaturity.
Things have to get cleaned up. And I think that putting the hammer down on a few people, like you said, will do that very quickly. Like anything else, talking to them, like
that's nothing.
You're going to go talk to somebody and he'll be like, yeah, sure. And then walk off 5 minutes later and still do the same thing.
Talking does nothing.
Yeah. But if you make them sit out a lap, or like I tweeted this, and I know it's a little extreme, but my thought is if somebody does something really bad, egregious at the end of the race, make them start the next race from pit lane. Yeah. And I assure you that it's not going to happen from anybody again if you're starting a lap down, basically.
Yeah. And it needs to, whatever the penalties are, it needs to happen like then, right? I don't like that we're taking days to, what's NASCAR going to do? Like, there should be someone in the tower with the power to say, nope, that ain't going to work. To the back or whatever it is. Sit on pit lane for a lap. You got to empower the person that's running race control to use their eyes and brain to make shots to the head calls.
That's the one thing I like about IMSA officiating, because as soon as something is potentially an issue, like seconds later, you'll hear this incident is under review. Maybe 30 seconds to a minute later, they'll call it. They'll say, okay, it's clear, or we're giving this person a penalty. They give them about a minute to argue their case over IM, and then you got to go do your drive-through or whatever else. And I like that process because it's transparent, it's consistent, and I know that when I've made mistakes that have caused a penalty, I knew exactly what to expect because, all right, I messed up, I let this tire go. I know my guy's going to have to do a drive-through now because that's the case. But it's not like, oh, well, maybe if they feel this way or that way. No, like this gets announced. It's available to everybody, and you can hear it, you can see it, and that's it. And fans have access to, see and listen to all of that. And I think consistency, I know some things are subjective, but consistency, even if you have subjective calls occasionally, will help fans to accept it more, and will teach these guys, hey, this is not acceptable.
Yep.
Yeah. And like Denny said, you probably only need one to make it work, right?
Yep. Well, that pretty much wraps up the weekend. You got a review you want to read there?
I got a review here from Kentucky Kent. Sorry, Kent. I'm assuming he's a Kentucky fan. You have a great podcast, even though I am a Joey Logano fan. I was told by my friend to check out your podcast, and ever since I have been hooked. I also find myself following you more on the track on race day. Listening to the podcast has opened my eyes to see what kind of person and driver you are. Good luck this year. I hope one day you can hold that championship trophy like you deserve.
I bet Kentucky Kent loves the fact that his driver's got 3 championships and I've got none. Since we had a rivalry over some time of our careers. But thank you for that review. Appreciate it. This weekend coming up, we got next races at Darlington. Throwback weekend. I'm throwing back to Carl Edwards. That Sport Clips scheme was fantastic. Got a lot of great reviews there online. I'm looking forward to that. This race is on FS1, right? 3 p.m. So make sure y'all tune into that. Hopefully we can go back to back. That would be awesome.
And people want to know, will you do a backflip if you win?
Not a chance. I would break my neck. I'm trying to think. If I started, straight up, I maybe would get to here. I'd probably break my back because I probably couldn't even get to where I crushed my head. I'm not flexible anymore. I don't have the power. It wouldn't happen.
It's just way too much risk.
Way too much risk and not happening. So appreciate y'all guys tuning in, and we'll see you next week.